Singer for INXS, Michael Hutchence was an international phenomenon. His command of the stage earned him comparisons to legends like Mick Jagger and Jim Morrison.
He was going to do what he wanted to do, and what he wanted to do was conquer the world, basically.
Michael could sit on a stool all night and still be one of the most charismatic singers and performers I've ever seen.
Michael lived his life on the edge, and the tabloids were there to chronicle the slightest slip. Every love affair became front-page news.
Yeah, there's sex in the air. I mean, that's what the music scene attracts.
There were a heck of a lot of parties going on, and he loved women, and women loved him.
If he was with someone, that night was probably the best night of her life.
But according to Michael's friends, his rock star life led him down a rocky road of uncertainty and self-doubt.
He felt he had no real friends. He felt like, you know, there were very few people he could count on and trust.
You know, and there's the loneliness as well. There's the Janis Joplin, I make love to 10,000 people every night and go home alone sort of side to it.
And in the end, Michael Hutchence died alone. The coroner ruled his death a suicide, but many who loved Michael Hutchence refused to believe it. They say he had every reason to live, and his death had to be accidental.
There's only two people in the world who will actually know what happened that night, and that's Michael and God.
This wasn't some sort of out there freaky guy who's, you know, got up. This is a really smart man who just obviously made a mistake.
Now, VH1 chronicles the all-too-short life of one of rock's most fascinating frontmen, Michael Hutchence, the story behind the music. Michael Hutchence was a consummate entertainer. Those who heard his music admired his voice. Those who saw him live reveled in the energy and enthusiasm of his performance.
He showed that you could work hard, you could have a hell of a lot of fun, and you could make people laugh and dance.
Once he'd step on that stage, you could see that room turn around on itself, and he was just such a major focus and excitement.
He could play that role really well, the rock star. He was very good at it, but he was much more interesting than that.
Those close to Michael say that he possessed an uncommon charm and grace. His quick wit disguised a shy, warm character.
Michael was a very humble person, and I think a lot of Michael was shy, and people took it the wrong way.
Above all, Michael's family and friends say that he was a loving father who cherished his baby girl, Tiger Lily.
He never stopped talking about Tiger. The light of his life was Tiger Lily.
It was lovely to see him with her. He was so sweet with her.
Australian police have confirmed that the rock star Michael Hutchence was found in a Sydney hotel room. Detectives say they're baffled about the circumstances of the death of the lead singer of the group INXS.
On November 22nd, 1997, Michael Hutchence died alone in a Sydney hotel room. He was just 37 years old. Music had lost a great artist. A family had lost a son. A little girl had lost her father.
I've learned to live with my grief. Hard. But life has to go on.
I thought about all the people he loved. I thought about little baby Tiger Lily, whom he's so loved. He's such a good father, you know. And I thought about all the other people that he knew and loved, and just felt their loss.
I want him to be remembered for him as a person, that sweet, sensitive, humble, generous, kind person, soulful person he was, and what a tremendous friend he was.
We gather, the people of Sydney, people around the world, to mourn the death of someone whom most of us barely knew. We saw him, a distant figure on a stage, and somehow felt that we knew him. We listened to him sing and felt that it was for us alone.
Michael Hutchence's short life began in Australia on January 22, 1960. He spent his earliest years in Sydney. Then when he was 4, Michael made the first of many moves when his family packed up and headed for Hong Kong. Michael's mother, Patricia, says that the exotic locale had a tremendous effect on her son.
Culturally, it was an eye-opener. It was wonderful to meet all the, various peoples from various countries. And I mean, Australia was a long way from anywhere at that time. And there was socially so much to do.
A promising young swimmer, Michael spent much of his time alone reading poetry and listening to music. When he was 12, he and his family left Hong Kong and returned to the leafy suburbs of Sydney. Michael entered high school and made friends quickly, though sometimes unconventionally.
Actually, the first time I met Andrew, I was in a fight with this guy. As soon as I got to school, in 10 minutes, I got into this fight with this guy. And Andrew, smart enough to know another guy who was about 4 foot taller than him even. This enormous guy, Paul Scoville, a guy from England.
Yes, his physical size came in very handy.
Yes, and g'day, Paul. And he came over and stopped this fight, pulled me out of this fight, and that's how we got to know each other. It's like a movie.
Michael and Andrew Farriss shared a passion for music and became fast friends. However, just as Michael started settling into life in suburban Sydney, Michael's father, Kel, says that he was forced to move again.
There was an upset in the family. Unfortunately, his mother and I decided to part, and she took him to Hollywood because she was pursuing her makeup career and took Mike with her.
In the fall of '75, 15-year-old Michael found himself living in the heart of Hollywood, worlds away from Australia and his little brother, Rhett.
It affected both of our lives dramatically, I think. We had contact, but I mean, you know how it is when you go away, and I mean, you can love somebody very much, but sometimes when you're in another country, you just tend to forget about them.
Michael spent about a year in LA before he returned to live with his father in Sydney. Once back, he hooked up with his old friend, Andrew Farriss. Andrew played in a small after-school band, and one day when Michael was watching a rehearsal, he landed an impromptu audition.
Andrew gave me a microphone and said, sing, and I sort of, attempted to sing for a while, and it stuck.
Kirk Pengilly, Tim and John Farriss, and Gary Beers rounded out the group's sound, and INXS was formed. According to Michael's father, Kel, they often practiced in the Hutchence family garage.
Used to see guitars coming out and a set of drums coming out, and it sort of grew and grew. And we had a bit of trouble with some of the local police that come around and say, hey, these guys are making such a racket in the afternoons, and a lot of people are complaining, so we'd have to tone them down a little.
In '78, Michael graduated from high school and dove headfirst into a career in rock and roll. He and the band toured relentlessly, playing in virtually any place that would have them.
Most of the clubs that you played in had carpets that had 20 years of alcohol and cigarettes and vomit crushed into them.
Greg Pirano was a member of the Australian cult band Hunters and Collectors. He and Michael became friends, crossing paths on Australia's brutal pub circuit.
The crowds are pretty wild, pretty raw kind of people, and they drank a lot of beer and made a lot of noise and, loved to fight.
There's no equipment, nothing. It's really rough, and the main thing you got to watch out for is beer glasses coming at you, sort of thing.
In 1980, INXS caught a break. They signed a record deal with an Australian label and released 2 albums.
We're pretty happy with the fact that we made an album. And that we were still playing around traps and pubs to obnoxious Australians, being really drunk, having a good time.
The first 2 were a little shaky. You can tell they're really getting their sense of themselves.
Based on their popularity in Australia, INXS landed a new international record contract in July of '82. The pact would soon take the group off the Australian pub circuit for good. 3 months later, INXS released Shabu Shaba. The LP was the band's 3rd, but the first to be released in the U.S. In INXS hit the road, and in May of '83, the band made their first big splash in the States, performing at the US Festival in Southern California.
They got an encore, which was just so exciting for them. And later on, we came back to my house and watched it on television. And on the news, they just showed one band, and that was them. And we all sat in awe around the television, eating chili, I think.
By the time they actually showed up in America, they already had their concept in place, and they really had their confidence going as well, and it really showed on the record, and it showed in Michael's performances.
Next, the wonder from Down Under takes to the wilder side of rock and roll.
If he was with someone, that night was probably the best night of her life.
And later, amongst the crowd, Michael feels alone on the road.
He used to ring me up from like Phoenix at 3 o'clock in the morning after they'd played, and he was really like...
By the spring of '84, INXS had successfully invaded America and had just released their fourth album called The Swing.
Dream on, white boy, dream on, black girl, black girl.
MTV recognized the band's appeal and Michael's charisma and plastered both on its airwaves.
We've got the first door open, but, you know, we want Americans to forget the hype, forget we're Australian. Just come and see it.
Yeah, I think video, like shows like this, have had a lot to do with, if you like, turning America onto some different sort of music.
When INXS released their next LP in '85, Music Television Support helped the group score their first top 10 single in the U.S., a song called What You Need.
MTV was very important to Michael and the band. Michael and the band were also very important to MTV. They were a package that MTV could embrace eagerly.
Hi, Michael, here's Tim, INXS guest VJs MTV.
With a dynamic Michael Hutchence up front, INXS had gone from pub rats to pinups.
During the Listen Like These, the women were going crazy.
Martha Trout, the band's U.S. representative, says that Michael's command of the stage was winning him comparisons to rock legends like Mick Jagger and Jim Morrison.
They did some show, and I think Mick Jagger was there, and he said, I think Mick is trying to take my moves, you know? So he used to always joke about things like that.
Michael could sit on a stool all night and still be one of the most charismatic singers and performers I've ever seen.
Riding high, Michael and the band toured Europe and the States with the same tenacity that had helped them navigate Australia's unforgiving pub scene years earlier.
We've been playing live for a long time, we've been together for a long time, and I guess we're at the point where it all sort of, everybody knows about it around the world, and we're really happy about that, that actually we do exist. People know we are INXS.
They really toured. I mean, they were not about that. I mean, they got down. They'd be in, you know, Spain one day, and then we'd have them in China the next. I mean, it was just, they were all over the place.
And then I was thinking, you know, these guys really deserve anything they get because they're really, really pushing it.
The band banged ahead at a blistering pace and released their sixth LP entitled Kick in October of '87. Afterwards, things were never the same. The album soared to number 3 on the charts and spawned 4 top 10 singles.
Hey, are you ready for a new sensation?
During Kick, it was 24 hours. You'd just go around the clock. You know, because it was one single after another, and the band toured America like at least 3 times that year.
Kick was the big payday. Kick was probably their best record in the sense that the songwriting had really been refined, the production was really taut, you know, everything about it worked. But Kick was really the cumulative product of 10 years of work.
I need you tonight. 'Cause I'm not sleeping. There's something about you, girl.
I just felt so proud. When those guys did Kick, I thought, oh, wow, you know, because it went millions everywhere. It's terrific.
Kick eventually sold over 10 million copies and turned this band of Aussie upstarts into the world's preeminent pop band. For his part, Michael Hutchence was now a bona fide superstar.
You wanna my kind? I need perfection. It's a twisted selection.
On stage, Michael played the role of a master showman. Off stage, he remained shy and vulnerable. It was a paradox that few could understand.
He was always shy. I think he just took on another persona. You know, he always called that the other Michael Hutchence. When he went on stage, that was the other Michael Hutchence.
He was oddly insecure about his singing, which I could never quite figure out because he's a really unique voice. You know, it's a very resonant voice. It fills all frequencies. It's like a 12-string guitar or something. I mean, it's an amazing voice. He didn't seem to think so.
What confidence he lacked on stage, he more than made up for backstage. Over the years, Michael earned a richly deserved reputation as a ladies' man.
Yeah, there's sex in the air. I mean, that's just natural. That's what the music and entertainment scene attracts.
To get so much girls. Hold on, wait a minute. Let's calculate it all week. Well, let's see it.
Thursday, Monday, and Wednesday. There was a heck of a lot of parties going on, I know. And I mean, he loved women, and women loved him.
Cutest guy has to be Michael Hutchence. Michael Hutchence. Very attractive. Very cute. So sexy.
If he was with someone, that night was probably the best night of her life.
Michael relished his success, but his father worried that he'd be spoiled by it.
There were so many temptations. Everything was given to them. And I used to say to him, you know, you keep your head level, mate, because if you get caught up in drugs and too much booze and too many women and all this, I mean, it can ruin the whole act. And he used to listen. I don't know whether he took any advice, but he used to listen.
By 1988, the demands of his red-hot career were taking a toll, and Michael was growing weary of the relentless pace.
He was totally pressured. He was losing it at times. And he was partying a lot, and he would go on 20 interviews a day, then have to do a show, then have to go to the next city and do more interviews. And everyone wanted a piece of him, including his hair, you know, everybody. And it was getting to him.
Next, Michael's night of fun ends with a knockout blow.
The cab driver got out of his car and pushed him, and he fell over and smacked his head on the curb.
And later, an untimely end for an uncommon talent.
There was a knock at the front door, and the police came. I just couldn't believe it. Terrible. Terrible shock.
By '88, Michael Hutchence was a rock and roll superstar. And while he cherished the role, he was feeling consumed by it. What's more, Michael and his bandmates were living very different lives. While some were settling down and raising families, Michael was wandering the world.
If I thought of them as a family of brothers, all 6 of them, Michael would be the outcast a little bit, because he was different. He didn't have a family, he didn't have kids, he was different.
He was the wild colonial boy. Yeah, he was total travel rat. Loved it, Hong Kong, Sydney, London, New York, LA, Paris. He was the classic pop star in that sense.
Michael was loyal to the band, but he wanted to explore new music on his own. In '89, he recorded an album under the name Max Q. The LP was edgier and funkier than his work with INXS. Michael hoped it would win him credibility with music's avant-garde.
It was his first album Michael had sung on apart from INXS with other band members, so that album meant a lot to him. I remember him coming over and just this huge beaming face and wanting to play me a few of the songs that he was just really stoked with.
But the album was a commercial flop, and Michael was bitterly disappointed. Making matters worse, the tabloid press was hot on Michael's heels. Michael had recently started a relationship with Australian pop princess Kylie Minogue, and the paparazzi snapped at the young couple's every turn.
I think that was the first time ever in his life that he'd been kind of stalked by people purely to get a photo of him with the person that he was with, because it was big news and it would make a lot of money. And it was the first time really I'd seen him really angry about the press.
It was a little strange for a while there, because you know, your phones get tapped and people get apartments across the way and have telescopic lenses, and they chase you in cars all day, and you can get on the phone and say all kinds of crap, and they start printing it and believing it.
I put on a party for Michael's 30th birthday, and when he was going out with Kylie. And this paparazzi guy here in Sydney, who was a friend of ours, he took a photograph of Michael, flew to London the next day and got £15,000 for this one shot of Michael and Kylie. And that's when you start to question that sort of thing, you know, what does all this mean, you know? Is this guy really my friend, or is he there to make a buck?
Michael tried to shrug off his failed LP and the media's newfound fascination with his personal life. But in 1990, when INXS recorded their next album, X, Michael found it very difficult to return to the fold.
In the dark of night, those small hours.
There were many times he'd say, I'm out of here, I'm leaving. But something always drew him back. I'm sure it was people like myself and others who he was close to that, you know, convinced him that it was a great situation for him.
X was released in September of '90, and while it eventually sold over 4 million copies worldwide, INXS was losing its luster in the U.S. The LP produced only one top 10 single in the States.
INXS were seen as an 80s phenomenon, and as soon as you go from one decade to another, there is a perception that that was then and this is now. And unfortunately, INXS got caught up in that.
The band launched an enormous and expensive international tour to promote X. They played to sold-out crowds and appeared to be living carefree, comfortable lives. But INXS's stateside slip deeply affected Michael. He was anxious and started to question himself.
It was a lonely time for him, and when people would criticize that the music may not be up to par or Michael may not be looking as sexy as usual, it just left him very sad. You know, it left him very confused. And he needed friendships. He needed people to talk to, and he could talk for hours on the phone.
He used to ring me up from like Phoenix at 3 o'clock in the morning after they'd played, and he was really lonely, and he'd say, I'm really lonely. And it's a pretty good indication that you're losing touch with the people around you as well.
By the time the X tour wound down in mid-91, Michael was ending his relationship with Kylie Minogue. He had moved on and started another very public affair, this one with Danish supermodel Helena Christensen.
They talked for about 6 weeks on the phone before they actually met. It was quite funny. They had this romance on the phone, and eventually decided, yes, let's meet. And they did, and that was a very lovely relationship.
But in the summer of '92, Michael was dealt a blow that would change his life forever. While in Copenhagen on a night out with Helena, Michael got into a fight with a taxi driver. The results were disastrous.
He was very drunk, and they were out and they got some takeaway food, and he was standing in the middle of a little cobbled street that, you know, traffic uses, and this cab came along and he refused to move. You know, he just wanted to eat his food, and he was being a bit of a dickhead, obviously. And the cab driver got out of his car and pushed him, and he fell over and smacked his head on the curb.
Michael was hurt, but friends say he waited weeks before he saw a doctor. When he finally sought treatment, Michael was told terrible news. As a result of the blow, his senses of taste and smell were greatly diminished, and he would never regain them.
He, the big wine connoisseur, you know, couldn't taste. He couldn't taste anything. You know, I won't get to what he really couldn't taste, which was really bothering him, you know, being the Michael Hutchence that I know, but it bothered him a great deal, and sense of smell, smelling a woman, it was like he was a very sensual person, and those kind of things affected him deeply.
I find it really sad that somebody who has access to the best in the world, the finest in the world, it doesn't mean anything more to them because they can't taste or smell it.
Already unsure of himself and his career, Michael now became deeply depressed. Friends say that he was never the same.
He was very irritable, and I think he started on Prozac as a result of that accident.
He became, in my own opinion, more depressed at times than he ever would before. Things seemed to get him down more than normally.
Next, the pressure mounts for Michael.
He said, I don't give a anymore. With anger, I don't give a anymore.
And later, a haunting duet.
I just sang it, and I sang it once more with feeling. You know, what can I tell you?
The early 90s were a difficult time for Michael Hutchence. After the X Tour, INXS continued to record and release albums, but friends say Michael Hutchence was depressed and consumed by self-doubt.
He felt that feeling that I'm sure a lot of artists have felt when they go up the hill and then they go down the hill. And am I a has-been, and am I over? And that's a horrible feeling. And when you're dealing with a person like Michael, who's so humble and so soulful, and it breaks his heart, you know? It's like, and in the interim, he was going through personal problems, and it was just all at him at once, and I think it was too much for him.
He just seemed to be, you know, traveling, and there wasn't a lot of the music being done. He was turning more into celebrity. And it seemed, the only change I can sort of feel about it was that it was separate, getting very separate from the band. And it was becoming a lot more Michael Hutchence and not INXS.
Michael tried to break out of his funk and started work on a solo album. But his relationship with Elena Christensen was on the rocks. They split up in early '95. Then Michael started a secret romance with Paula Yates, the wife of British musician Sir Bob Geldof. But the relationship didn't remain a secret for long.
Michael and Paula are supposed to be having this little weekend away sort of thing on the quiet. They're in a restaurant surrounded, or every other table around them is surrounded by journalists, pretty much jotting down anything that they can get.
A photographer ambushed the couple outside of their London hotel. Furious, Michael struck back. But his punches didn't stop the paparazzi's attack. Instead, Michael found himself the target of the most intense media scrutiny of his life.
It's just an invasion of people's privacy again, and I just think it was pretty bad the way it was all handled. And I mean, it really upset Michael terribly.
With Michael and Paula's affair now public, Bob Geldof filed for divorce from Paula Yates, his wife of 10 years, and with whom he had fathered 3 daughters. Then Paula moved into Michael's London flat.
I think he was reaching out for that family life and that stability that kids could bring you, and he fell in love with the kids.
Paula and Bob Geldof's divorce became final in May of '96. The question that remained was who would get custody of their 3 young children. Michael publicly supported Paula's fight to win custody of the kids.
Paula is a good woman. To those that do know her and not to those who read about her, has had to pay an enormous price for leaving St. Bob for me.
But despite all the controversy, Michael and Paula were building a life together. On July 22nd, 1996, Paula gave birth to a baby girl they called Heavenly Harani Tiger Lily.
You can't fight nature, just come, you know, suddenly there's children there, whatever it does to you. You either think you're ready for it or whatever, but I love it. I'm loving it, you know. It's the first time I've been this unselfish in my life, I think. So I'm really enjoying it, you know.
You can always see that he's got a really beaming smile on his face, and that tiger really meant a lot to him, you know.
But as hard as he tried to get on with his life, it seemed that the tabloids wouldn't let him. Friends say that Michael felt trapped. The pressures caused by Paula's custody battle were wearing on him, and Michael became despondent.
I remember seeing him and thinking he was louder, he was less there in the moment, there was things going on. It was a feeling then, a sense. He was sort of seemingly run down more, did not seem happy to me.
I'd hear him crying when I would hear those lonely times when he'd be in Europe and I wasn't there, and it broke my heart, you know, because he was so confused about what was going on in London and what was going on with the band and what was going on, you know, in every aspect of his life.
In early '97, INXS released a new album called Elegantly Wasted, but aside from the record's title track, the LP got little notice. Friends say that Michael's depression worsened and he started using drugs to dull his pain.
There were months that Michael would be totally clean and, you know, again, he'd be working out and feeling good, but when he was feeling the pressures of the Paula situation and the Bob Geldof and everything else, it just weighed on him and he wanted to escape reality.
On November 18, 1997, Michael Hutchence returned to Australia for the last leg of INXS's 20th anniversary tour. He was looking forward to spending the Christmas holidays in Sydney with Paula, her daughters, and Tiger Lily. They were due to fly down to Australia in the next few days, pending the outcome of Paula's latest round of custody hearings with Bob Geldof. Michael seemed surprisingly relaxed at the time.
He was excited about finishing this tour so that he could do his own thing finally. He was really excited about his album.
He had his eye on acting, and he told me when he got to Sydney, you know, on that last trip, that he'd won a small part in a Tarantino movie, and he was just over the top about this.
Michael and the band spent the afternoon of November 21st rehearsing in a small Sydney studio. Later, Michael, his father Kel, and his stepmother Susie went out for a peaceful dinner.
He seemed very happy, actually. I mean, we had a very, very lovely evening together. It was a bright, jolly evening with Mike in great form. I mean, in hindsight, I probably now realize that he was covering a lot. I think he was, actually, but he left us in a great... We dropped him back to the Ritz-Carlton, and he even danced away from the car, you know, waving.
That night, at around 11 p.m., Michael invited two friends up to his room for some drinks. He was waiting for a call from Paula about the outcome of the custody hearings and wanted to be near his phone. A few hours later, he got a phone call from Martha Traub in New York.
He sounded fabulous. And then we talked about January, and he said, now don't forget, you gotta take care of this solo album. We gotta work on it. We want to finish it.
Michael's friends say they left his room at about 5 a.m. on November 22nd. Then Paula Yates reportedly called Michael with bad news. Her custody hearing was postponed. She had to stay in London and therefore would not be bringing Tiger Lily to Sydney for the holidays. Upset, Michael called Bob Geldof, begging him to allow the kids to fly to Australia, but Geldof refused. Then an angry Michael made two quick calls. One to his old friend Michelle Bennett, the other to his manager Martha Traub. But in both cases, he was forced to leave messages. Martha retrieved hers just minutes after Michael called.
He said, I don't give a anymore. With anger, I don't give a anymore.
At approximately 10 a.m., a distraught Michael Hutchence left a second message on Martha Traub's answering machine, this time pleading with her to call back. Next, he placed another call to his friend Michelle Bennett.
We talked to her and he said, you know, Michelle, I need to talk to you, can you come over? And she did, she actually came over to the hotel, because she only lives like 10 minutes away from the hotel.
Michelle Bennett arrived at Michael's hotel at about 10:30 a.m. and knocked on the door to his room, but there was no answer.
She went downstairs and left a note, and I mean, he'd only talked to her like half an hour before. It was quite strange.
Just before noon on November 22nd, a hotel maid entered Michael's room and found his lifeless, naked body lying behind the door.
the lead singer of top Australian band INXS, found dead at Sydney's Ritz-Carlton Hotel at Double Bay. The emergency call came just before 1 o'clock. Police told that a prominent personality had been found dead in his suite.
The press was broadcasting the horrible news before authorities had a chance to contact Michael's family.
The phone rang and I was in the den then, and I lifted up and this reporter said, would you like to comment about Michael? And I said, what do you mean, the tour or what? He said, oh, and he hung up. And I just went cold, and I thought, God, what was that all about? Oh, there's been an accident or something. And just as I left the room there was a knock at the front door, and the police came. I just couldn't believe it. Terrible. Terrible shock.
Then all at once, the studio called me on one line, and the tour manager called me on the other line and said he was dead. And then I was home with the band, and I heard on the radio how he had died. And I think I kind of passed out. You know, I lost a part of me. I think, you know, it just like, why wasn't I there with him? You know, you always think that.
Next, remembering Michael Hutchence.
And he was no tragic figure, he was like oxygen. The room was a dizzier place for him being in it.
Michael Hutchence's funeral was held at St. Andrew's Cathedral in Sydney on November 27, 1997. Outside, thousands packed the streets to mourn a great musician. Inside, hundreds grieved for a man they knew and loved.
Those who are here today to remember and to farewell one who was to them a son, a brother, a partner, a father, and a friend.
In the months following his passing, the same tabloid press that had stalked Michael for years speculated his death was the result of everything from murder to a sexual experiment gone tragically wrong. In the end, the coroner ruled Michael's death a suicide.
There's three ways Michael died. Michael was killed, Michael killed himself, or Michael died by accident. And I've kind of, even though I've heard so many theories and conspiracies about all three, I don't think Michael killed himself. It was an accident.
Michael did kill himself. Michael did hang himself. That's a sad, horrible fact about this. Got himself into an area where he was very unhappy and didn't know where he was heading with it and couldn't stop trashing himself to see through the haze.
I know he thought suicide was dumb. He didn't buy into it at all. I had conversations with him about Kurt Cobain, saying how, you know, how sad is that, you know, that Kurt Cobain has gone from the world, and he was angry about that. So I don't really, I find it hard to imagine that Michael took his own life. It doesn't really fit in with my picture of him.
There's only two people in the world who will actually know what happened that night, and that's Michael and God, and the rest is speculation.
I remember being told, you know, that Michael was dead. I remember my first reaction was just a tremendous loss, not why. And I still feel that, and I will always feel that. And I think the why isn't tremendously important.
What is important, say those who loved Michael, is keeping his memory alive. The Hutchence family has erected a memorial in Sydney. It will stand forever as a testament to Michael's love for life, music, and his little girl.
We don't want to mourn any more in that griefy sort of way. I think everybody wants to celebrate Mark's life and what he gave us, you know.
What Michael Hutchence left the world was an abundance of great music. And now the self-titled solo album he labored over the last 3 years of his life will finally be released in the U.S. on February 22nd.
Yeah, we're just watching history.
This is a really good record that deserved to come out in Michael's lifetime, that it was one more confirmation of what a potent and dramatic singer he was. I'd say this is the record that should have been the beginning of the rest of his life. And unfortunately, it's kind of, you know, an epitaph. As epitaphs go, it's a good one.
The album is filled with some of the most passionate and deeply autobiographical lyrics of Michael's career.
I just want to slide away and come alive again.
On a song called Slide Away, Michael pleads to escape, then return to live and love once more.
Come alive again.
And in a verse recorded after Michael's death, U2's Bono responds to his old friend's call.
I didn't write the lyric, I just sang it, and I sang it once more with feeling. You know, what can I tell you? There's nothing really to add to it. I was just pleased to be in the room with him, even if it was in cyberspace, so to speak.
Rock and roll is littered with tales of stars who died before their time. The questions behind their deaths always seem to outnumber the answers. Michael Hutchence's untimely passing is no exception. What is certain, however, is Michael was a truly extraordinary talent who will be forever missed.
He was no tragic figure. He was like oxygen, you know. The room was a dizzier place for him being in it. He was a charming man.
Michael was a great performer, a good lyricist, a good writer, a poet, and an explorer. You know, he really went out there and explored. I think like a visual image of Michael is just when saying goodbye to him, that he'd always be peace. Every time I say goodbye to him, he'd go peace like that, and that was the last image I have of him. I've got a lot of happy memories with Michael.
She's sexy, she's sassy, but sorry guys, she's Canadian. Spend Wednesday night with the lovely and talented Shania Twain. A special Popped Up Divas Live, followed by her Behind the Music and her Come On Over special. It all happens Wednesday night beginning at 8, 7 Central, only on VH1.